Hi everyone, Avery here again. Today we're here to talk about attachment parenting, what it is and what it isn't. There's a lot of different misconceptions out there. And so we want to bust up some of those and let you know that really it's all about choice. It's about recognizing that these are some of the choices that others are making that are in line with attachment parenting, and then deciding if any of those are right for your family. So to start, why did I choose attachment parenting? Well, basically just because it felt right to me. I stumbled into different research about it. Maya Bialik is a great neurophysicist and actress and parent, and she wrote a book called Beyond the Sling that is a really excellent attachment parenting book. Now, she goes all the way, and I'll talk about that later. But basically, pieces from attachment parenting really spoke to me and rang true to what I wanted to instill in my kids and the way that I wanted to parent. And so I've come up with the terminology of embodied parenting. To me, that's just making sure that our values and our actions are aligned as parents, that we're not saying one thing and doing things that are completely in conflict of that we're doing our best to have values that mean that we're raising strong, secure, safe, healthy, loved children, and that our actions match that. And so there's a lot of pieces of attachment parenting that felt good and true to me. And so we'll start there. So thank you for being here. All right, so I'm going to start off by saying some of the things that attachment parenting is not, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So attachment parenting is not spoiling your children. They are not getting everything that they want. Attachment parenting is not indulgent parenting. True attachment parents do not spoil their children. Spoiling is done when a child is given everything that they want, not just everything that they need. There's a big difference there. It's regardless of what they need, and it's regardless of what is practical. Attachment parents believe that love and comfort are free and necessary. Not so for sweets and toys. There is a difference. It is intentional. It's also not helicopter parenting. With adoption, there will be times when we will not leave the room that our child is in for months at a time. During that initial cocooning period, when we're trying to really learn and become attuned to them, when we're practicing time ins rather than time outs, there will be a period of time that's appropriate for that. That does not mean that we're necessarily hovering over them at all moments. We are not controlling them. There's a difference in that as well. However, attachment parenting can be quite free range. A lot of people that practice attachment parenting are hippie style people like myself. And so although there will be boundaries and we will be there to meet their needs, our children will be allowed to play and be curious and be a little free range. Following, teaching, demonstrating, explaining, showing how to do things safely, and allowing the children to do and to actively learn. That's all part of attachment parenting and healthy parenting, in my opinion. And for attachment itself, well, attachment is not just love. Love is an emotion. Attachment takes effort and action. Love is sentimentality, whereas attachment is the capacity to be present with, understand, and see another person, and truly accept them for exactly who they are. That's intentional. And foremost, attachment is a biological need in humans because our young remain absolutely dependent for so long. Without a connection to an adult, we literally would not survive in those first few years. It's a dependency where the parent shows the child that they are highly sensitive to them and responsive to their needs. The child then learns that they can depend on their caregiver, and because they can depend on their parents and their parents are their whole entire world at that time, that teaches them that the world is inherently safe. So attachment parenting is based off of the model of 4 attachment styles in human beings. I'll show the diagram here. Now, our ultimate goal for ourselves and for raising our kids is that they become securely attached human beings. When you're securely attached, you have the best, not only life expectancy, but life satisfaction. You're going to have the most joy capacity in your life. And that's what we want. When we have the most joy and safety and security, that is when we are able to be curious and learn and produce the most in the world. We're our best selves. Now, this model was developed quite a long time ago, and so of course some things change over time. And for example, they really focus, I believe, on the mother being the primary caregiver. And this just isn't the case for all families. As we know now, some families do not even have a mother. Perhaps they have two fathers. Now, I have switched the thinking in my brain, and when I read these things, to primary caregiver. And I encourage you to do the same, and then to just use what works for your family. I adore definitions of love that fold in attachment. Like I said before, love is action. It is attentive and responsive. It's interactions, skin-to-skin contact, being calm to help them to learn how to regulate their emotional body. It's providing predictable and reliable responses, providing comfort and meeting their needs. Attentive love is scientifically healing. A great example of this is when you look at children who have failure to thrive, primarily in orphanages, and I'll use that because it's my experience and recent learning with adopting from India. Now, this can be any country, any place that has orphanages, and even foster care systems. When a child is born and is no longer with their biological mother, sometimes they seem to just give up. And this is called failure to thrive. Their little systems just don't even want to absorb the nutrients from any of the food if they even want to consume it. Now, once those kids are in a loving, caring, attentive, attuned environment, they eat, their body absorbs the nutrients in a completely different way, and they grow. Not only do they grow physically, but their complexion changes, their smile changes, their eyes change. It's a really phenomenal thing to see. That isn't the case for all kids. Failure to thrive is a very serious condition. So I don't mean to make light of that, but I have seen enough cases, children, to understand that scientific methodology and that it really is true. Now, we use the word healing a lot. I do myself when it comes to all of this, that we're healing our children, that we're healing their brains. I do look at it that way. I personally think that I healed my own brain and my own neural pathways. But more accurately, we're providing a safe, healthy environment for our children to grow the way they were always meant to grow, to become the human they were always meant to become. We are just allowing them the best environment to ensure that they can do that. So yes, we may be helping them to heal from some of their past trauma, but really what we're doing is providing a comforting and safe environment so our children can grow into the humans they were always meant to become. This allows them to physically develop those neural pathways in their brains. Ones that may have been shut down or not yet developed, it allows them to bring forward whole new responses. It allows them to mentally be curious and to learn, emotionally to be able to express and process, and spiritually to have belief in something bigger than oneself. I'm not necessarily a religious person, but I'm very spiritual. And we all have our own dance with that. So wherever you reside, it is proven to be very beneficial to us to have a belief in something larger than oneself, whatever that may be. All right, so all of this might have you wondering, what is attachment parenting really? So number one, it focuses on the parents. Primarily one caregiver, meeting the needs of their child 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. Number 2, it focuses on building and maintaining the essential relationship between a parent and the child. Building and maintaining the relationship. Connection over correction. Number 2. All right, and number 3, understanding the key connection between relationship and human development. Just how vital relationship is on human development. Number 4, we want to embrace the idea of development and that children are not just small adults. They shouldn't be oppressed, scolded, and driven into conformity. All right, so really attachment parenting is the idea that parents are the best caregivers for their children. It's fairly straightforward. That idea stretches 24 hours a day, and so that's where it gets complicated. In Western world, we live in a society that doesn't always allow for those types of interactions. Attachment parenting does include natural childbirth and breastfeeding. Those are things that we often have no control in adoption. Now, there are other pieces though, whether we're adopting a baby or a toddler that could use some age regression, baby wearing, co-sleeping, eating organic, and homeschooling. These are all pieces that any family can focus on. You can choose what's right for you and your family, for your child and your family. I mentioned Maya Bialik earlier. Now, she was the person that played Blossom on the hit TV show for those of us of that generation. She also went on to do a lot of cool things. She earned degrees in how the brain works. She now has a very amazing podcast on mental health. I will link it if I have not already. Now, she wrote a book called Beyond the Sling. And in that book, she shared her parenting practices. And she went all the way with attachment parenting. And so the pivotal story in that book to me was the fact that her and her husband actually decided to not have their children wear diapers most of the time when at all avoidable. And so she would watch in her children for subtle cues of them needing to go to the bathroom and then would respond to that and either get them to a sink or a toilet or a plant. And so her children never had to be potty trained per se. They never had to be trained out of that feeling of wearing a diaper because they didn't have it. They weren't used to that already. Now, that is extra, and for certain, most of us cannot go to that length, but it's just a good example of how being attuned to your child really can make a difference. Now, that's being attuned, but it also takes a lot of time and attention. And in our Western society, we aren't always allowed that. We don't always have that grace. We often need 2 incomes. We have to do what's best for our family. Attachment parenting is based on us as the parents, responding immediately to our children's needs in a predictable way, all of the time. This means providing constant loving care, including engaging in nighttime parenting, such as co-sleeping. We need to be responsive to our children 24 hours a day. They have needs in the nighttime too. Most of us don't sleep straight through the night, and most of our children don't, and certainly may not if they've just come home to us. That's a lot of change to be able to sleep through the night. And if they wake up scared, they deserve to have a loving, attuned person to pay attention to them and respond to their needs. Now, this requires us to be attuned to what our children's needs are and how they express them. So that's when cocooning comes in place. It's really good for us to be attuned to our child and to figure out how they express each of their individual needs. If you're bringing home more than one child at once, you'll need to learn how to become attuned to these 2 different humans, as they will express their needs likely differently. And we also want to get in the groove of being so attuned to our children that we understand and can predict moments that might be hard for them. That way we can proactively help. We can either avoid events if we think that it may be too much, or we can prepare for them. For example, if it would be an auditory overstimulation, you can prepare by bringing earplugs so you can still experience the event, but it won't be too much for them. Given our children's start, it may be difficult for them to self-soothe or self-regulate. It's our job to help our children heal their brains by constantly showing up for them. They are learning to trust that we accept their good, bad, and their ugly so that they can relax and be at rest with us. Once they trust us, they begin to look to us as to how to regulate their emotions. The neurosequential model of treatment is basically that the base level is safety and survival. If we do not feel safe, we cannot move on from this base level. When in the midst of trauma, we often get stuck here in fight, flight, or freeze. Once we feel safe, we can move on to the limbic system, which is the emotional and behavioral management. And when that's under control, then we can get curious about the world. We can move on to the cortical system, which is our critical thinking and the learning portion. But without safety and security, we can never move forward to these other steps. We need to feel safe before we can learn and explore. Now, what we need to understand is that lacking an attachment figure early in life is likely to mean that our kids will have an unregulated emotional system. Maybe some of our kids will have been lucky enough to have an attachment figure. As we've talked about before, this doesn't need to be their biological parent. Perhaps they've had a very attentive caregiver in their home or orphanage. We can hope for this. Regardless, they're likely to have a dysregulated nervous system. And this is likely to present as very intense emotional states. It's completely normal. Emotional dysregulation is really uncomfortable in the body. Acting out is sometimes simply an attempt at coping. If you think of your own self and when you get really angry or really sad and how that is just super uncomfortable inside of your body, and especially if you're in an environment where you're not able to express yourself at that time, we need to allow our children space to just let it out. As long as they are safe and they are doing no harm around them, it's okay. We need to get more comfortable with the discomfort of allowing those hard emotions. That might be hard for us, but it's a good place to get to for them. So it's our job to help our kids move through that neurosequential model of treatment through providing safe, predictable, reliable serve and return interactions. Now again, as I've discussed in my other videos, serve and return interactions are when a child expresses a need and a parent or caregiver is there to immediately respond to that need. When there is a good enough serve and return interaction in our lives, we believe and develop assumptions that our self is worthy and the world is safe. Toxic stress undoes all of those assumptions. Because of this, our children may inherently expect bad things will happen to them, which leads back to the importance of demonstrating over and over again that we are safe, dependable, and reliable parents for our children. We need to remember that empathy does not mean poor differentiation. This is important to us as parents who are empathetic. Basically meaning that our child can be feeling upset and we can acknowledge that they are feeling upset. We can allow them to feel their feelings, but we do not need to feel it ourselves and we do not need to fix it. We just want to remain calm and help them to get back to a calm place when they're ready. Developmentally, our adopted kids are likely to be behind, especially emotionally. So we want to meet them where they're at. Allowing age regression is a wonderful way to do this. Carry them If they're small enough to still fit into a holder, and some children when they come home internationally are still small enough up until age 5, wear them facing inwards. It's very comforting for the child, and especially for younger ones. But for toddlers and a little bit older children as well, if they're comfortable with it and if they find comfort and solace and safety and they're relaxed, then enjoy that experience. If they don't like it, then don't do it naturally. That goes with anything. If your child gives you signs of not wanting something, we're always following our child's signs. That's what being attuned is. Now, we want to allow physical contact as much as they will allow. So cuddle your kids, allow lots of cuddles and snuggles and closeness. If your child's comfortable with it, of course, always following their lead. But continue to offer it. Even if at first they are hesitant, continue to offer. Don't push past boundaries, but be there. Always follow their lead and continue to show up. Independence in babies and toddlers is a Western construct. Most of the world doesn't run that way. We need to create dependence in our children before independence. We need to know when to hold them close and then when to urge them forward. So another hot topic in attachment parenting is discipline. Now, when it comes to discipline and attachment parenting, we just need to remember that we preserve the relationship before all else. I'll say it again, over all else, we protect and nurture our relationship with our child. Connection over correction. That's going to be difficult for a lot of us to really work out in practicality because many of us were not raised that way ourselves. But it's really important, and especially when raising children who have experienced trauma. Again, this does not mean spoiling. You can and you should have firm boundaries. So discipline, not punishment, is used with closeness, not distance. There are no timeouts. We do time-ins, which means you need to spend time with your child. They still can be spending time by themselves, but in the same room as you. So you still have eyes and ears on the situation. And you say what you want to see in them, not what you don't. Focus on the positive. We want to use simple, straightforward language. Now, this goes with raising any children when you're doing attachment parenting, but of course, especially those that are transracially adopting and may have language barriers as well. We want to have short scripts that we use with our kids. No matter what discipline, we're always reinforcing our love and that we will always be there for them. We're never using violence or threats or judgments, persuasion, and definitely never any corporal punishment. When our child misbehaves, we want to think, what do they need right now? Their behavior is a sign of a need. They are not out to get you. Our kids will also push our buttons. It's basically their job. So make sure that we don't pin our emotions on our kids. If we're triggered, if we get upset, we need to take time to make ourselves calm and come back to the situation. Take a few deep breaths, take a time out yourself. We want to model healthy relationships and emotional management. As attachment parents, we believe that our children are our allies, not our adversaries. We believe that they are taught, not trained. Some other key attributes of attachment parenting also include responding to your child's cries, always. They're not faking. We just need to believe that if they are crying, whether it's fake or real, that they need us. And that's a need. Therefore, we need to respond. Big parts that lots of parents don't like is that there's either no or limited TV watching. We want to be really careful around screen time. There's also some rules and some thinking around no learning before being in school, before being school age. You can do your own research on these parts. No forced sharing. That's another funny one for parents to wrap their heads around. We want to encourage it, but not force these things. Use nurturing touch and use lots of communication. We want to feed with love and respect and together. We're using patience and love and sensitivity and thoughtfulness. We want to put away those cell phones. It's very difficult to be attuned or attached to our children if we have a device in our faces. Oh my goodness. So thanks so much for sticking around to this point. For me, my highest priority is just ensuring that I am able to attach to my children. And given my upbringing, I cannot rely on that happening naturally, unfortunately. So I have always known that I could not and would not parent like I was parented, but that does not mean that I naturally knew how to do it differently. I needed to learn. I recognized that that was my only example, my only experience to pull from. And so I started all of this learning, and I was able to build confidence in my ability to attach and my ability to parent and my ability to now share that with you, which is great. I feel privileged to know so much at this point and to know that there is still a lot to learn, and I am always learning, and I will fess up when I screw up because I believe in it. And I recognize that this content is especially useful to us here in North America, where the majority of our population has experienced childhood trauma. It is affecting all of us, because if it's not affecting you, it's affecting someone in your family, or certainly one of your coworkers or someone in your friend sphere. It's important to all of us. All right, you made it to the end. Thank you. Okay, so discussion questions for today. What do you plan to change in your current daily activities to ensure that you are available for your children? This can be physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. In fact, it should be all of those. Think about food, screen time, sleep, and your own personal love languages. How is it all going to work together? And what pieces of attachment parenting are you going to carry forward for your family? Thanks again for being here. I'm super proud of you for showing up. Till next time.